Hello, everyone. Eric Hurst here with Training Cafe number 6. Of course, we begin each episode together, communing with coffee. Let's take a sip. Got the Paris mug here today. Shout out to French climbers, European climbers, if there's any watching. This is, as I said, episode 6 of Training Cafe. You know, I started this 3 weeks ago. It was kind of my April initiative. This is, as I said, episode 6 of Training Cafe. You know, I started this 3 weeks ago. It was kind of my And there's something weird going on here. Just let me pause for a moment and see if I can avoid this technical glitch. I was getting some feedback here. Are you hearing me okay, folks? I hope. In any case, this was my April initiative to do something new since we are in lockdown here in Pennsylvania, as probably you are where you're at. And so as long as this COVID-19 self-quarantine continues, I'm going to keep doing these training cafes twice a week. And my goal each episode is to answer a few of your questions, but also to bring you a main topic where we dig into a specific subject that I think can positively impact your training and your climbing, help you train smarter and avoid injury and become a better climber in the long term. And, the last couple of episodes, we talked quite a bit about hangboard training. Today, I want to talk a bit about energy system training, how you can use the concept of energy systems, the bioenergetic systems that fuel our muscles, power our muscles when we exercise and climb, how you can use knowledge of that material to make your training more effective, to better organize your training and get better results. So that we'll get to that in just a little bit, but I just wanted to start off with a few brief items. One is to thank everybody who's provided feedback on the first 5 episodes of Training Cafe. When I started doing this, I wasn't quite sure what shape or form these broadcasts, these live streams would take, and we're kind of slowly going to suss things out and hopefully make these shows informative, entertaining, inspiring, and not make them too long. Try to keep them bite-sized, maybe around a half an hour at a time, and try to make them as content-rich as possible. So keep the feedback coming. I appreciate it. And I also, I guess, want to try to shout out here to some of the people viewing: Chris, Richard, Thomas, Sinix, Greg. I see you left a few questions. Penna, Rob, Matt, James, Gunnar, Christopher, Kevin, Seba, Ian. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I know there's others that I'm maybe not seeing your names pop up here on the screen. These are just folks who have done a shout out or have logged in a short question here. So thank you so much for tuning in to Training Cafe. Also, my official shout out of this episode, and I try to do that once each episode, on an achievement or a person I want to give kudos to or something that you need to know about. And today's shout out is to my German friend, Udo Neumann. He's of my generation. He's a 50-something and a brilliant climbing coach of decades. He's one of the few people who's been at this as long as I have. And Udo is a movement master. I don't know of any coach in the world, there may be, but none that I know, that understand movement and have spent as much time analyzing climbing movement as much as Udo has. And he's recently released a series of videos. I think there's a 3-part series on climbing movement. It's kind of like a schooling or education on climbing movement, which is fascinating stuff. And he has a new release just out, I believe, this week. And so you can rent those or buy them. And while the price tag might seem a little high, if you consider the wealth of experience and knowledge going in to generating those videos and the value that they present, they provide a very interactive, rich look at climbing movement, a way that I don't think has been done out there, in a broad scale yet. It's really, I think, the future of being able to analyze and break down film of climbing the way Udo does. And so I would encourage you to check out his offerings on his Vimeo channel. If you Google Vimeo Udo Neumann, I think you'll probably find his feed, or go to his Twitter, which is at the letter U and then DINI, like Udini, a combination of Udo and Houdini, which I think is a perfect Twitter handle. So that's my shout out for today. Okay, on to a few questions here that have come in since the last episode, and just one or two that I saw entered in before today's broadcast. One is from, and just let me pull it up here so I make sure I get it right, from Griffin. Got into a discussion with my girlfriend about how far down you should go in the range of motion when doing a pull-up. Should you go to the point of complete disengagement of the shoulders, a complete passive straight arm hang, or should you not go to that bottom end of the range of motion and not disengage your shoulders? And that's a really good question because, pull-ups are one of the most basic and obvious exercises for climbers. I'm sure everybody does some pull-ups, either as a warm-up for climbing, or maybe if you're training at home, you do a lot of pull-ups as a form of climbing. And there's many different ways to do pull-ups. You can add weight and do really high-intensity pull-ups to develop your maximum strength, or you can do body weight or even less than body weight pull-ups to develop strength endurance, doing many sets with limited rest. And so the answer to the question on whether you should disengage at the bottom of the pull-ups is, it kind of depends. As a rule, most of your pull-ups, I would recommend you do not disengage the shoulders. Do not go into that passive straight arm hang where your shoulders are loose, and potentially done frequently and in high volumes could be injurious to your shoulders. By keeping your scapular stabilizers engaged, which means stopping just shy of the bottom of the pull-up and then beginning the next pull-up, it's safer on your shoulders. And certainly if you're repping out on pull-ups, if you're doing a lot of pull-ups for volume, sets of 10 or 15 or 20 or more, it's too slow and too stressful to go to a disengaged position at the bottom. Same thing if you're doing weighted pull-ups. If you're adding, like I will do weighted pull-ups with anywhere from 50 to 90 pounds added to my body. And it's a great max strength workout. Now I'm only doing 3 to 5 reps at a time, but that is another situation where you would not want to go all the way down and kind of relax your scapular stabilizers. That would just put too much stress on the shoulder joint. It would not be smart. Now that being said, you do have to train what is considered the end range of a pull-up. And doing a pull-up has 2 end ranges, the very bottom and the very top position. So we've just talked about the very bottom position. You do need to train the muscles, getting out of that bottom position, out of the hole, you might say, so to speak. I think the best way to do that is with a scapular pull-up, a separate exercise of its own where you're on a pull-up bar or the jug holds of a fingerboard, and you just, from being in a kind of relaxed, shoulder shrug position, pull your shoulders down, pull your shoulders down, pull your shoulders down. You might even think about bending the bar, okay, and pull your shoulders down, bend the bar, and your body begins to elevate almost into a front lever position. That's kind of what I call a scapular pull-up plus. And so doing some scapular pull-ups at body weight, very controlled, gives you that kinesthetic awareness of what it feels like to tighten down your shoulders, which is very important for climbers, and gives you a way to train that bottom end range very specifically and very safely. And so that's something I would do twice a week or maybe even 3 times a week. I do some scapular pull-ups as part of my warm-up every climbing day, just to kind of get those scapular stabilizer muscles moving, get that joint warmed up. Now, what about the other end range? That's the top range of motion. Think about this. When you're doing a pull-up, when you're repping out real fast in a pull-up, you're accelerating through the pull-up. And as you get near the top of the pull-up, momentum is actually doing a lot of the work for you. And so if you're someone that does a lot of pull-up training quickly, you're actually not getting very strong at this top, at the end range strength. And that's something that's problematic, because in climbing, we do pull holds down and have to lock off when we reach up, or have to clip a bolt, or have to put a piece of gear in. You need to get strong at that top end of range. And so a couple ways to do that. One would be to slow down your pull-ups. If you're doing weighted pull-ups, you by its nature are moving more slowly. And so as you slowly do that weighted pull-up, pause at the top for 1 second and hold the lock off. And then continue with your next weighted pull-up. And so doing some slow pull-ups, some pull-ups with a 1 second hold is a way to work that high-end range of motion. There's other ways to do it. You could do a pull-up on a set of rings and then push one ring out and hold the lock off, one ring out and hold the lock off. And that's another good way to do it. And it allows, because it's on rings, your forearms to turn a little bit. It's not quite as hard on your elbow. You have to be careful. If you're prone to elbow pain and tendonitis, you have to be careful on lock-off type exercises. And so the rings are a little safer way to do it than the pull-up. So I don't want to get long-winded on this, but a simple exercise like a pull-up, there's still a lot of nuance to doing it right and being sure you're getting the most out of the pull-up. And so there's something new to think about, is the bottom and the top of the pull-up, being sure that you are able to get out of the hole with strength and control, and also hold a lock off with strength and control. So another long question to a short, or long answer to a short question. Needs a little more coffee here. Okay, question 2. How much hangboard training is too much? And that might be a relevant question right now, because I think in the last month, there's probably been more hangboards bought and installed worldwide than ever before, because of everybody being on lockdown. And if you don't have a bouldering wall, or even if you do, a hangboard's a great tool to train on. And so how much is too much? Well, again, it really depends. It depends on a lot of things. If you're new to climbing, well, then more than a few small workouts a week would be too much. If you're a veteran climber, if you're an elite climber, if you're a pro climber who's been doing it for a decade or more, you could probably do quite a bit of hangboard training. Now, you wouldn't do the exact same workout 6 times a week. And I've talked in the previous training cafes about, doing maybe 2 max hang sessions a week, 2 repeater sessions, and then maybe 1 or 2 moving hang sessions. And so those train distinctly different energy systems and put different amounts of force onto your connective tissues. And for an advanced climber, it would be a pretty good way to train at a fairly high volume without it being, hopefully, not becoming injurious. But again, there are a lot of factors. I mean, the loading history of your tendons and pulleys. That's something I try to get climbers to consider all the time, is not just how long you've been climbing, but what is your loading history? What have they been subjected to in previous years in terms of strains? Because tendons and ligaments adapt to training very slowly, much more slowly than muscles. And so if you have a long history of hangboard training, in campus training, in hard bouldering, and if you haven't been injured, your tendons and ligaments are quite strong and can really handle a lot more stress and strain and more volume in training than somebody who doesn't have that same loading history. Genetics have a factor. There are collagen-specific genes that dictate collagen synthesis and flexibility and connective tissue strength and proneness to injury. There are numerous studies out there that shows a genetic link to frequent recurrent injuries of connective tissues. So depending on the genes you've been blessed with or handed down to you by your parents, there is an influence there on, some people are just more bulletproof than others. And then nutrition and rest and age, those are all factors that come into training adaptations and how much load you can withstand without getting injured. And I really can't get into all those details here, but if you want to do a really rich study of these types of subjects, subscribe to my podcast. If you go onto iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify and search Eric Hurst's Training for Climbing podcast. I think I'm up to like maybe episode 45 or 46 now over the last few years. And those are like 1 hour lectures where I get into the real science of training for climbing on a lot of different areas, really quite diverse coverage. And so there are many hours, probably 50, 60 hours of podcasts that you could listen to if you're looking for something to do or to really get a deep study. And I put a lot of pride into developing these podcasts and making them very content rich. There's not a lot of fluff there. They're not interviews with a lot of chit chat. They are like more like a lecture, like a college level lecture that people say they listen to them multiple times to kind of soak up all the details. So there's a little promotion for my Training for Climbing podcast. So check those out. Okay, question 3, a short one. In fact, I saw it just popped up here a few minutes before the show about deadlifting. A lot of talk about deadlifting for climbing. Is that good, bad, somewhere in between? Well, it depends. Like a lot of questions, it depends. I have actually been an advocate for doing a limited amount of deadlifting. My book, Training for Climbing, the 3rd edition that came out a few years ago, the Spanish edition came out about a year ago, has a section on deadlifting and how to do it right so that you get benefits and not unintended consequences that actually hurt your climbing. And what would the unintended consequences be? Well, putting on muscle mass. Climbing is a strength-to-weight ratio sport. You do not want to add muscle to your legs. I will argue against just about anybody out there that while putting a little bit of muscle mass, a little bit of hypertrophy in the right places, your upper body, can be helpful for both male and female climbers. There's really just no reason to be adding mass to your lower body. And some people genetically, if you do deadlifting or squats or any of these posterior chain exercises that are common with CrossFitters or with weightlifters or bodybuilders, some people just blow up. They add weight, and if deadlifting has that effect on you, you probably shouldn't do it. With me, if I do just a few heavy lifts per week and continue with my climbing and my running, I don't put any weight on, but I get the benefit of a stronger posterior chain and stronger core. And those are two things that absolutely help with hard climbing. Your core, you can't just do 1 or 2 exercises like, front levers and crunches or planks, or you need to do a family of exercises to train core effectively. And the beauty of deadlifting is it trains your entire core. Everything tightens down. To get that bar off the ground, the bar is in your hands, your feet are connecting you to the ground. Well, by necessity, you have to tighten up from shoulders to feet, or from hands to feet. And so with everything bearing down intensely for a few seconds, deadlifting is a great core exercise. But again, you don't want to do it in any way that results in hypertrophy. So you don't want to be doing like 5 sets of 10 reps or 4 sets of 8 reps or 3 sets of 12 reps. Those are hypertrophy protocols. What you want to do is, with a lightweight, do a warm-up set of maybe 8 reps, and then do a couple heavy sets, a weight that allows you just to do 3 to 5 deadlifts with good form. That's essential, good form, because you can hurt yourself, your lower back, if you don't deadlift properly. And so I wouldn't say it's an essential exercise. Don't go out and feel like you have to do that. That's the game changer exercise. It's not. It's like one of those exercises that contributes a little nuance, a little help that maybe can supplement and strengthen your core and your posterior chain, which is important for doing dead point moves. Really extended moves on hard, steep climbs require a strong posterior chain. And so there are benefits there, but it's not a game-changing exercise. Like if you had the choice between deadlifting and campus training, do campus training. But if you can do the right amount of both of them, well, that would be even better. Okay, one more question, then we'll move on to the short topic, or at least a brief look at energy system training. The 4th question is relates to alactic training. So that's kind of one of the 3 energy systems that we'll be talking about here. And with maximum strength and power exercises that last 10 seconds or less, They train the alactic, the anaerobic alactic energy system, those brief bursts of power or near maximum strength. The question is, when resting between sets, and typically you want to rest 2, 3, 4 minutes between sets of that type of exercise. During those rest breaks, can you do another different alactic energy system exercise? Like if you're doing weighted hangs, 7-second max hangs, and then you're resting for 3 minutes between the 7-second max hang, could you do something else, like a weighted pull-up during that 3-minute rest? That would seem like a logical thing to do. It would be time efficient to use that rest time. But in the case of anaerobic alactic training, I actually think it's not the best way to do things, because you need to make a complete effort. And even though you're just training, let's say on the max hangs, apparently your finger flexors are what are being most stressed, most targeted. Your entire body is bearing down. Your shoulders, your core, everything is tightening down. And your brain, the neural drive being generated by your brain, is somewhat systemic. And so doing another exercise, even though it seems unrelated, even like a deadlift in between your max hangs, they seem very different. Well, you're still gripping the bar and you're still bearing down your whole body. The neural drive, throughout your body is still being turned on hard for a few seconds while you do the deadlifts. And so you're not getting the complete rest you would want between sets of max hangs. Or same thing with campus board. If you're doing, let's say, double dynos or big 4/7s or 1/5/8 or whatever you're doing, they require complete effort, and therefore, to do them right and in high quality, complete recovery. So take the 2 to 3 minute rest. Think about your training. Think about what you're feeling. Keep a training notebook that you're writing in between sets. I think being mentally engaged in your training is important. These phones are beautiful things that we can listen to podcasts and communicate with our friends and watch Training Café. But if you're spending your whole workout or the rest between every exercise fiddling on your phone, the neuroscience is pretty interesting. There's a residual effect. While we think we can multitask beautifully between things, the fact is, when you put your phone down, your subconscious mind is still engaged. There's a residual effect from that activity that then clouds or diminishes our ability to focus and make a complete deep effort on another task. And so a quiet mind, like when you're doing those max hangs, max campusing, max boulders, max tension wall problems, or trying to red point your project or your boulder, to go into it with a clear, focused mind is a huge difference maker. Now, maybe it's only this much, but when you're at your limit, when you're trying to do something at your limit, that is the difference maker. I guarantee you, when Adam Ondra did silence, his red point goes, when he sent it, he wasn't on his phone 5 seconds before that checking Snapchat or whatever. He was deep inside the process and preparing himself to send the route, his lifetime route. And I think that's something you just can't turn on at the crags. It has to be trained. And so when you're doing your high effort, high intensity climbing training, I think that's a good time to quiet your mind and learn to make complete efforts. Again, whether it's max hangs or whether it's you're trying to do your most difficult campus board sets or bouldering. What if you put the phone away and just get inside of your exercises for a half an hour? And between sets, think about what you're doing, what you're feeling, and take notes that you can record your workout, what you're feeling. I frequently refer back to my training notes, which go back many years, to analyze what I felt and was doing then and how I performed with what I'm doing now. And the best climbers, if you watch the Rotpunk movie about Alex Megos, he has journals going back years documenting every single workout and day of climbing. I know Margot Hayes does the same thing and keeps a journal with her thoughts and feelings and goals and workouts and such. And a lot of pro climbers are. That's nothing new. Wolfgang Gulick did it 30 years ago. And I think you and I should too, if we're really serious about climbing, if you want to make the most of your training for climbing. So again, another long answer to a short question. But if you're doing those maximal alactic exercises, rest completely and get deep inside what you're doing with a clear, focused mind so you can make maximal efforts. Finish up with one exercise, then move to the next exercise and repeat the process with that exercise. Okay, so I'm 25 minutes into this session, and so I've not left myself much time here to get into the topic of energy system, and so it's something that I will do more of in the future, but let me just do a quick primer on the topic. And actually, I did, I believe, 4 podcasts 2 years ago. If you go back to 2018, the Training for Climbing podcast, where I go really deep into this. And it's a cutting edge look. It's a cutting edge treatment, unlike I think any climbing coach has gotten into at that time 2 years ago now. Since then, a lot of people have really picked up the ball and run with it in a beautiful way. That's great. People are, I am happy to, see other people adding more to the topic and more nuance. And, we all are working together on developing the next, level of training for climbing, which demands we bring more science into it. And it demands that you have an appreciation for an understanding of the nuance of training for climbing and the nuance of performance. Again, whether it's the Udo Neumann breakdowns of the climbing movement, which is something we should all be starting to think more about, perhaps, and the understanding of energy system training or connective tissue training. These are all cutting edge topics that I love talking about and delving into the research on and bringing to climbers around the world. So in any case, energy systems, the bioenergetic systems that power our muscles, there are 3 of them, and they all contribute to some degree to powering exercise. We're talking about the ATP that is split to release energy, to allow our muscles to contract, to allow our body to function. ATP is being split constantly around the clock. Now, as I'm sitting here, I'm not splitting a lot of ATP to maintain my posture and to talk to you and to have my organs functioning. There's a small amount of ATP being broken down, and that needs to be generated. And for the most part, since I'm at a very low intensity here, it's happening via the aerobic energy system. The majority of it is being generated by mitochondria, breaking down fat or what little blood glucose is in my system to generate the ATP. But if I went down and started climbing or exercising at a very high level of power, the aerobic energy system couldn't supply enough ATP for those more powerful movements. And so a different energy system would take over. And for the highest power, most intense efforts, doing something at maximal intensity for just a few seconds, say 5 to 10 seconds, that is the anaerobic alactic energy system, which is a splitting ATP and also utilizing creatine phosphate that are stored in the muscle fibers. So it's instant energy. It's like turning on a light switch. It's instant energy. But those intracellular stores and the availability of ATP and creatine phosphate only last a few seconds. So if you get on a campus board, or if I got on the campus board right now and started doing double dynos, which for me is a maximal exercise, I could double dyno for between 5 and 10 seconds, and then I wouldn't be able to do it anymore. Because that maximal power exercise is almost entirely, not completely, but largely fueled by that anaerobic alactic energy system. And so by 5 to 10 seconds, I've blown through most of what I have. You never go to zero, but I've blown through most of what I have. And so to continue exercising beyond 5 or 10 seconds, I'd have to power down by 20% or so. And so if I started to do campus laddering instead, which is less powerful and less strenuous for me, I could continue on for maybe another 20, 30 seconds. But then I would start getting pumped. Well, during that power down to like, moderately high intensity exercise, lasting between 10 seconds and maybe even a minute in duration, that is the window where the anaerobic lactic energy system takes over. There's still a little bit of alactic contribution, and there's still some aerobic contribution, and that's actually ramping up as you get to 45 seconds or a minute of extended exercise. But you're really in the sweet spot of that anaerobic lactic energy system between 10 seconds and 30 seconds. And if you have a strong, a large anaerobic reserve, then maybe even out to 45 seconds or a minute. It's the anaerobic lactic system that breaks down glycogen stored in the cytosol, in your muscles. And in breaking down the glycogen and then generating ATP, you generate lactate and hydrogen ions, these metabolic byproducts. And the hydrogen ions begin to lower the pH inside of the cell. Now, the hydrogen ions and lactate are transported out of the cell to try to maintain a homeostasis. But if you're exercising hard and long for 20, 30, 40 seconds, the pH inside the cell drops. And that is when your brain starts to shut you down and you have a sensation of burning. There's probably both hypoxia and acidosis contributing to the discomfort that you sense, but your brain just interprets it as a loss of homeostasis and starts to downregulate and shut off your muscles, or at least power them down. And so, that anaerobic lactic energy system is finite. It's a finite reserve. Now, through training, you can increase the size of that reservoir, that anaerobic reservoir, through increasing glycogen stores, increasing buffering. There's intercellular and extracellular buffering that takes place that can be upregulated. There are lactate transporters that can be upregulated, your various enzymes that through training change. And those are all adaptations you get from training that anaerobic lactic energy system. That is what you want to do, especially if you enjoy doing long boulder problems or hard sport routes, which are very taxing on the anaerobic lactic energy system. But again, that system will fail you after 30 to 60 seconds of all-out climbing or all-out exercising. You get pumped, you power down, and if you want to keep climbing or exercising beyond that 45-second or 1 minute limit, it's the aerobic energy system that takes over as the primary source of ATP. Now, there's still some coming from the other energy systems, but the aerobic energy system takes over as the primary source. So if you're a route climber, whether it's a short, steep sport route or a long vertical route, or even silence, which is both long and steep, Adamandra's silence, the world's hardest sport climb, all of those things require a very strong aerobic energy system. But you have boulder problems embedded within that longer climb. Again, think of silence, Adamandra's route. Or think of your project. If you're a route climber, it probably has crux moves and sequences embedded within this longer route. And so climbing, and I presented a talk 2 years ago at the International Rock Climbers Researchers Association conference in Chamonix, France, about energy system training and how really climbing is almost like an intermittent sprint sport where you go all out for bursts, but then you dial back and have easier sections of climbing or even recovery periods on the route. And then you sprint again. Or the climber's version of a sprint is climbing a hard crux on a route and moving through it as quickly as you can. Again, if you watch videos of pro climbers on hard routes or a video of yourself on a hard route, if you're climbing most efficiently, you're probably sprinting or climbing as fast as you can with good technique from one rest to the next. And you're trying to get from one rest to the next in under a minute, or ideally under 45 seconds, because your anaerobic reserve only lasts about that long. And so if it takes you longer than that time length to get from the one rest to the next, you're more likely to pump out and fail. So climbing fast between rests and then using those rests to recover, to let your aerobic, all recovery is aerobic. So a strong aerobic system, aerobic power, helps you recover quickly at those rests, or during submaximal climbing, you can recover so that you regain some of your anaerobic reserve for the next crux. That's what Adam Ondra was doing on silence. He had those rests where he would rest for between 45 seconds and several minutes, depending how good the rest was. And his strong aerobic system was able to recover his anaerobic reserve. Taking the lactate, the hydrogen ions, trying to metabolize them, reconvert them into glucose, glycogen, the Cori cycle doing its thing, and then power into his next crux, which was very alactic and lactic. Aerobic energy system is not going to get him through that V13 crux. He needs the anaerobic system to do that. But the aerobic system is essential for those recovery periods to drive recovery and also for the submaximal climbing. And so there in a nutshell is a breakdown of the 3 energy systems. So the goal in training for climbing at a high level is to train each of those energy systems effectively. And you can't do it all in one workout. And so while this is way too much information and too advanced for a beginner level climber to try to implement, they should just do basic training and learn to climb. If you've been climbing for several years, if you're pretty high in the learning curve, if you are pushing your limits, then you are someone that does need more nuance. Nuance of technique, nuance of the mental game, nuance of physical training. And that's where the energy system training can really help you in. So again, there's a whole section on that in training for climbing that gives you specific exercises to use to train each energy system. And again, my podcasts have really delved into this deeply, and many other coaches are doing a great job beginning to express how to do this. But from a programming standpoint, each workout, whether it's a 1-hour workout at home today on your hangboard or bouldering wall, or whether it's going to the gym for a couple hours or going to the crag, if your goal is training, then you should be thinking about trying to target one energy system as best as you can per session. If you try to address all 3 energy systems, then you're not doing a good job at training any of them. And the signaling, when you train, the training doesn't make you stronger. The training provides a signal. There's various metabolic signals and a cascade of adaptations that follow the workout. And you recover stronger and hopefully adapt in a way that makes you more capable, makes each energy system a little stronger. And so to let those adaptations play out and to get the best signaling, it's best to focus on a workout. So if you're hangboard training, then warm up properly and then do a max hang session, which would train the alactic energy system. And you could do other exercises after that that cater to training that same energy system, like weighted pull-ups or deadlifts, things that are brief and intense. You would not want to mix in a bunch of repeaters or a bunch of sets of submaximal pull-up training because that's a different energy system. You'd be better off waiting to the next day and doing that workout that focuses on the lactic system, or doing a workout that focuses on the climbing specific aerobic system. Or if you're an advanced climber, you could do 2 different sessions in one day, but have them separated by at least 6 hours. So what we often do here at our house, if we're doing a 2-a-day workout, we may do a very slow, gradual warm up in the morning, and then do a max strength and power, max hangs, some campusing, some weighted pull-ups, some one-arm pull-ups, those types of max, exercises that all kind of target the alactic system. Of course, most of that workout is time spent resting. Just that's the nature of doing it right. Then after 6 hours of rest, later in the day, we may do something that is an anaerobic lactic, like a tread wall interval workout, or even go for a run and do some generalized aerobic training, which that's fine. If they're separated by 6 hours, then there's less interference between the workouts and the signaling. So there's something for you to think about. That's just a very short treatment on this topic. I hope you found it interesting, and hopefully it will kind of spur you on to further your studies on this topic of energy system. And so I'm now at the 40-minute mark, and I see a bunch of comments flying by. Forrest, Greg, everybody else who's tuned in for this episode, I really appreciate it. It looks like we have over 100 people watching live. So that's terrific for only the 6th episode of Trading Cafe. Please join me twice a week. As long as we're in this COVID-19 lockdown, I'm going to try to keep doing these twice a week. This week it was on Tuesday and Friday. Next week I'm going to probably go back to the Monday, Thursday schedule at noon Eastern time here in the United States, or 1600 GMT. And keep the questions coming. I'll try to answer them as best as I can, and each week bring you some inspiration, some insight, and we can share some good coffee together. Somebody just asked me what kind of coffee I drink. Well, Starbucks mug. I tend to drink Starbucks coffee. I'll drink any coffee, but I like my coffee dark, black, nothing added to it except some, if it's pre-workout or first thing in the morning, I put some supercharged collagen in my coffee. Have a little piece of dark chocolate with it, which is a great combination. The dark chocolate actually has epicatechin and copper, which are two very vital nutrients for climbers. So if you want a little bit of sweet into your diet, there's Eric's tip for the day. A few chunks of dark, it's got to be dark chocolate, is actually a very healthy thing. Now, you don't want to eat pounds of chocolate, but a few chunks of dark chocolate with your coffee, an excellent combination. Well, that does it for today. Until next time, Hurst out.